Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Townsend-Gard. I'm a law professor, and I just want to quilt. We're talking to Susan Ainsworth Smith. She is a long armor, and she's got her own business. We also already interviewed her daughter, Camille, and she gives us some insight into pricing and the business of it. She also tells us about red snappers. We have to get some red snappers, and all kinds of other things. So we're super psyched to chat with her, and here she is. So we're going to start with the first question, which is tell me your name and where you're calling from.
Okay, my name is Susan Ainsworth Smith, and I'm calling from Gresham, Oregon.
Awesome. And any relation to Camille that we've already interviewed?
Yes, she's my daughter, my oldest daughter.
She's your oldest daughter. So, so we are interviewing you. Tell me your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life.
In my life, I would say I was self-taught, so I think it was probably in about the early 80s that I saw something about quilting and it interested me, so I started doing it. I was a seamstress, sewing clothing and so forth for myself and my daughters from the time about, 7th grade or so, like most girls.
Interesting. And did you feel like there was more, you saw quilting, you started as sewing. When did you start quilting? Was that also at that time?
It was in the early 80s.
Early 80s.
Yes.
Yeah, and then so early 80s, quilt shops are popping up. It's after the 76. Did you feel like there was kind of, hey, you should try quilting kind of feeling at that point?
Well, what happened was I received a book back in the olden days. I don't know if you remember, but you would be in a book club, and if you didn't tell them you didn't want the books,
yes, I remember those. They're the worst. And the book would show up.
The books would come automatically.
It was the worst, right? Oh my gosh.
And so I received a book that was about quilting, and it really caught my interest. And I decided to try a few of the things that were in the book, one being cathedral windows.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How did that go? Those are hard. How did that go?
Yeah, it was, well, of course, that was probably my first UFO.
That's the only project I threw out this year was the cathedral window one. It was the worst.
But, I was still interested, and I was... well, I'm not exactly sure when this happened, but a friend of my sister's was taking a quilting class at, I came from San Diego, so that's where all this took place early on. And there was a class at community education, adult education at the local high school. And God, I wonder if I have that quilt here. And it was a sampler. And every week we went and we were given a new block to make. And so, then more and more interest. And this was about the time when I discovered a rotary cutter and a cutting mat.
Right.
And,
huge.
Yeah, it was huge. And at this time too, I was a single parent, so I didn't have a lot of money. And so I had to buy the little teeny tiny 28 millimeter rotary cutter because that was all I could afford. And
did you have a sense of them because the rotary cutter was pretty late invention? It's right around that time, right?
Yeah,
so
I'm not
sure. Are they
sure.
expensive when they come out?
Well, I think they must have been because I also had to buy a mat, which was probably, and I'm sure I bought the smallest one that was usable, and also a ruler, which I can't even remember. I don't think it was even OmniGrid at that time. I don't think they were in existence yet. But I had my tools. I purchased some books at my local quilt shop, fabric store, really. And then I just started making stuff on my own.
Interesting. And then when did you? So let's fast forward. First, your daughter also quilts. So that's
Yeah.
Did you teach her to quilt as a kid?
Not exactly, but she was always around and she saw what I was doing and was interested. And so she was self-taught also, but probably in her early teens.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
am I right? Am I remembering right that she does passage quilts? Does she do
Yes. Yeah. We both do.
that? You both do.
Right.
And if people haven't heard her, tell them what it is, what a passage quilt is.
Well, a passage quilt is a quilt that is made for, I hate to call it charity, but it's a giving quilt that they're given to hospitals or hospices, nursing homes, and they're smaller in size, maybe 40 by 60, and more subdued colors. No, screaming bright pinks or we try to keep them a little bit on the calmer side, and so they're given to the nursing staff or whomever, whatever the situation is. And I don't know that they necessarily are given to the patient while they're dying, but I'm sure it's given to the family afterwards. And so that's what the passage quilt is for. And it's for comfort, for comforting the family at the time of passing.
Wow. That's very kind.
Thank you.
Interesting. And how did you all get in? I mean, I've already heard the story, but in case people haven't, how did you get into doing this?
Well, through my local guild. Now, there's a new one in my town. Now, Gresham, where I live, it's east of Portland, Oregon. So we're about 30 minutes east of the main city. And there's other guilds that are closer into town, but I wasn't as participatory with them. And they do have comforting quilts at these other guilds, which they make not just for people who are passing away, but for all different reasons, for charity. So I knew about it through that, but just 3 years ago, we started a guild here in my town. And one of the ladies she'll take anybody's scraps and she'll make all kinds of quilts. And it's just amazing what she can do with the scraps, even small stuff, strips, like string quilts. And so, I knew because I'm a long arm quilter too, and I have a business. So I always have tons of cutoffs of batting and the backings from quilts. And so this was a way to get rid of some of that stuff too.
That's very important, right? So you got to keep it moving out. Interesting. Well, what I wanted to really talk to you about today is your long arming business and sort of what's going on there. So you've got a long arming, you do, is it Kelly Creek Studio?
Yes, Kelly Creek Studio.
That's at Kelly Creek, kellycreek.studio. Is that the...
you can reach... well, I changed over from Squarespace to WordPress, and it kind of messed up my address. If you do kellycreekstudio.com, it'll get you there.
Got it. So Kelly is K-E, for those listening that want to sort of follow along, it's Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y, Creek, C-R-E-E-K studio.com, kellycreekstudio.com. And we'll have a link to it on your page on our website. Okay. All right. So kellycreekstudio.com. Tell us what it is. Where does the name come from?
Across the street from my house, behind the houses on the other side of the street, is a little green space, and what runs through it is Kelly Creek. So that's perfect.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so you long arm quilt, but you don't do it. And I would love to know more about it, but you're doing it by hand. You're not using a computer. Is that right?
It's free motion. I'm not computerized. That is correct.
That's really interesting. And why? Why make that choice?
I started long arm machine quilting 17 years ago, and at that point in time, when I purchased my machine, it wasn't readily available. The computerized quilting machines.
Yeah.
And it would have been cost prohibitive as well.
Yeah, it's really expensive.
It is expensive, and I've been able to, and not everybody is cut out to be a free motion quilter.
Yeah.
But I've practiced a lot and have done a lot of quilting that way, and I feel very confident in my skills as a free motion quilter.
Are you doing it right now?
No.
There was a sound. There was like a sound in the background that sounded like you were. I'm like, oh.
My tummy growling.
Sorry, I had to ask. I'm like, are you multitasking?
No, just people.
It must be outside. But it was like a phantom sound of a log arm in the background. So, okay. So I have a couple questions. One, I have questions about like the practical, like the economic side, but also the design side. So I'm looking at your website and it's got edge to edge quilting, which is like normal things. But how do you decide what pattern to do? Like, I get really stressed out. Like, I've been working a lot on my free motion quilting skills, and I just always feel really intimidated about what design, like how much do you pay attention to the blocks that are there and how much you just do kind of all over and not worry about what's on the canvas kind of thing.
Right. Well, it depends partly on the customer or on myself. If I'm quilting something for myself, I want it to complement the piecing. And so sometimes when things are very angular, very like stars or real pointy things,
right.
Then I'll try to do something that's a more rounded and flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people like to see the quilting, and other people don't. So if they kind of want it to be in the background, I'll do something very simple, a ribbon, or meandering is kind of, a lot of people poo-poo that.
Yeah.
Some people want it, and really, it's bottom line. It's to hold the three layers together.
Yeah.
And they, I'm going to be loading a t-shirt quilt on. After these other two that I've got to finish for this lady. And she just wants, she wants the t-shirts to be what you see.
Yeah.
So she doesn't want, all these feathers and, straight line quilting or stitch in the ditch or, anything that's going to take away too much from the t-shirts, because that is the main focus of the quilt.
Yeah, and with the all-over pattern, like what happens, like what is your philosophy? Like the all-over patterns that you have here are really beautiful. There's a lot of variation, but when you're choosing it, does the customer choose it or do you choose it, or does it vary?
We usually discuss it, what they would like, or if something's, a quilt that's going to be gifted to a gentleman, then, they're not necessarily going to want flowers,
Right.
or maybe they do want flowers. Sometimes it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so I just try to get a feel for what the end use of the quilt is, and what the person likes. And of course, I do have a lot of repeat customers, and some people just say, I just want it done.
Yeah, really interesting. Do you have I love you have like the flower pattern here that's got like leaves. It's really cool. It's very kind of I don't know, very cheery, I guess is a good word. Do you have certain like go-to patterns that you use that you really like to do?
Absolutely. Some patterns are, sometimes people just want, fast and, they just want it done.
Yeah.
And so I do have a couple patterns that do, they achieve that.
Yeah.
So, so it really, because I do some of the same stuff over and over again. I do like to have some variation, like on my free motion.
Yeah.
I like to have some variations there, but sometimes people will see a quilt and they'll know that I had quilted it.
Interesting, because you've got your own style that's identifiable.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's really interesting. It's so interesting. I think about like the main quilting teachers right now, like Leah Day and Angela Walters and those,
Right.
and like there's going to be like a whole generation that quilts like, or at least attempts to quilt like them, right? That it's a style as much as anything else. It's really interesting.
And that's something that I do. I love Pinterest. If I'm a little bit stuck on something, or if I have an idea in my mind, I'll go to Pinterest and I'll just look and see things, and maybe there will be something that Angela Walter has done, and then I'll try to do something similar, and then it's basically my interpretation of Angela.
Because it's kind of like handwriting. Everybody's is going to be different anyway, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, speaking of handwriting, my handwriting is awful. Do you think that, and I'm not super artistic, my daughter is very artistic, but do you think that it's a skill you can learn, or do you have to have good penmanship to be a good quilter, free motion quilter?
And I don't have good penmanship. Actually, it's fair penmanship. I went to Catholic school for 12 years.
So yeah, you had to get it at least passable, or you'd still be there.
Right. Cursive was, something that you had to learn.
Right. That's funny.
Fairly good. But now I have a couple friends who have long arm quilting machines strictly for themselves.
Yeah.
And they really don't stray far from the paper pantos. They don't really do much free motion.
Yeah.
They keep their stitch regulators on. And, when they want to take that step, both of them have had their machines about not quite 4 years.
Yeah.
And I think you want to have to take that step to go ahead and do a free motion. And you've got to practice. It is very much.
It's a lot of practice. I've been practicing all year, and
Now,
I'm starting to see just a little bit of improvement. But it's taken a long time. Like ruler work is a little easier. Like just the last couple weeks or so, it's not as that jittery. It's not as jittery.
Right.
That's the part.
Right. And so you're doing this on a long arm too?
No, I'm doing it on a sit down. It's a Juki 2010 that you can switch. You can move. But we are getting a long arm. So yes. So the long arm will come this summer. But it won't be computerized. So it'll be the old school. I'm going old school.
Right.
So
right. Well, that's a good time, and that the charity quilts.
Yeah.
That's a good place to practice.
To practice, yes. Well, we're all. Yeah, so we got a partial donation of a long arm quilt from our local spot here, All Brands, which will be one of our sponsors. So we're psyched to do that. But yeah, it's really about trying to experience it and see, how is it different. I will be interested to see how much it is different from sitting down and moving the fabric versus moving the machine. I think it'll be really interesting to see if there's more precision or not in doing it that way.
Yeah. And for me, I did my own. I've never, before I had a long arm, I had never had someone else quilt a quilt for me.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Never sent a quilt out to a long armer.
Yeah.
And
so you had to figure out what happens when that happens. So you got the long arm. So let's take me back. So how did you decide to get a long arm, and then how quickly did you turn it into a business?
Okay, I decided to get a long arm because I was tired of shoving queen size quilts through the throat of a domestic machine and I did it, and I did all sizes, but I must have.
It's annoying, right?
Two or three
so
queen
annoying.
size quilts,
Yeah.
and part of it was my husband and I discussed it, and part of it was, if I get this machine, then I could do a business because I had a full-time job. I had a day job, and so we looked into it, and we went several different places and had demos and so forth. And within after I purchased it, it was about 6 months, maybe 8 months before I started taking in, real customer quilts. I mean, I had done some quilting for people, that they didn't pay me, but to try it out, to give me something to practice on.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yes. Like that's totally like, yeah, I'm really curious what will happen with this long arm. It's like, I'm like, that's not, we don't need another job is all I'm saying. But I'm like, okay, like let's see if we can make extra money doing quilting at night. I don't know. We'll see what happens. The whole thing is ridiculous.
Especially with the doing it free motion.
Yeah, I mean, I hope eventually we'll be able to add the computerized. Like, we can't quite afford that yet, but I also feel like it's kind of good because I think I'd like to be able to do that part before adding the computerized part.
Right. Yeah. I think it's important to because I know some other people in my community who have businesses, and all they have is the computerized quilting, and they don't know how to do any free motion.
Yeah. No, it's a whole different thing. And it definitely takes skill to do it. So it's not to, denigrate anyone. It's very different. I also think that once we can get the computerized thing, I'd love to have artists come. First, I'd love to have artists come and just do free motion quilting to see what they do on a machine. Like, I think that would be fascinating, right? Someone who draws or paints can, what does it look like when they use this machine? But also once we have the computerized one, I really want to be able to because you can put in stuff from other people to sort of, again, experience like what happens if you ask a kindergarten class to make drawings that you could then put into the machine and things like that. So, so that I think would be really interesting as a community project. But right now we're just trying to wait for it. If there's a space that is waiting for it to arrive. I've cleaned out one space. I'm really excited. I just walk by it every day. That is where it will go when it arrives. So
Right. Well, you'll need more space for all the stuff,
I know.
For batting.
Right. Now, let me ask you about the pricing because I think it's really interesting. It seems like it's pretty standard out there how much people charge. Do you find that it varies very much?
I think it depends on I think and I don't mean to say this, for those of us who are, run-of-the-mill long arm quilters.
Yeah.
Just
the regular ones, the regular long arm quilters. You're not famous or fancy. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But there are quilters in the Portland area who are extremely talented, and it shows in their pricing. But they also have very long lead times too. And there's I think there's a lot of.
It shows in their pricing. Like you charge 2 cents. Per square inch. If you're super famous, how much are you charging?
Well, I think it's, I've never really thought about that.
Right.
I've seen,
is it 6 cents? We don't,
I've seen it. It's dependent upon, is that custom quilting?
Yeah.
We're just regular old.
Right. And yours is pretty reasonable because you're doing it by hand. You're not even doing computerized quilting. So that's a lot of, it's labor intensive.
But I have one customer. She actually she has a memory quilt business.
Oh,
and
cool.
She makes the quilts. People send her the t-shirts or the hats or the flannel shirts or whatever, the baby clothes, and she constructs the memory quilts. But she brings them to me.
Oh,
the quilting, and it's always her pricing is always custom because. I'm almost always going to be quilting a separate border.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And design in the border, and then sometimes there'll be pockets or the placket of a button-down shirt. All these things that I have to avoid.
Yeah. And then does she add on your cost to her cost? How does she? Yeah.
Yeah. It's all part of how she prices.
That's great.
Yeah, it is, and it keeps things steady. So
that's really great. Now, how many quilts do you think you do in a week or a month?
It depends. I like to keep it about 3 to 5 a week, no more than.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to from the moment you get it to the moment you give it back? How many hours is it taking you to do these?
Oh, the actual number of the actual stitching time really depends on how big the quilt is and what I'm doing. Yeah. I would say not even some quilts, could be just maybe an hour and a half worth of stitching.
That's nice.
Because there is a timer on my machine, so I always mark down what time, and it's only counting the actual time that the machine's running.
Yeah.
So, I always mark it down when I start and then when I finish, so I can just kind of get an idea. Because, my pricing is my pricing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm making a lot more on, quilt X, and then I'm making less on something else where I'm having to spend more time.
Now, you're adding the batting. You're adding in the cost of the batting. What kind of batting do you like to use, and how do you price it? Are you getting it wholesale and then marking it up a little bit, or sort of what is it exactly? How are you doing that?
Most customers do bring their batting, and so that's fine if that's what they do. But I do have warm and natural or warm and white, and I do buy wholesale here in Portland. we have a company called E.E. Schenck. They're a wholesaler. They're also the manufacturer of Maywood fabrics. I don't know if you've heard of Maywood, but they do have a fabric line of their own. So I do, because I have a business, I'm able to go and buy wholesale, and I do mark it up. I charge per the linear inch on the batting. If they don't bring batting, and some people it's too much trouble. I don't have a backing though. That's not something that
they have to bring the backing.
Yeah, they have to bring the backing, and that's I think you really need a lot more space.
That's a lot, yeah, and everyone. I mean, that's craziness. So then how much, like you have on here a labor charge. What part, when do they get charged for labor?
Well, if I need to physically do something, like if they want me to iron the backing or piece of backing.
Got it. Right. So anything else additional to the sewing part.
And that rarely happens.
Interesting. But at least it's there. Now, I think it was really interesting. You said on your preparation, you said to, do you say to have the seams open? Is that right? What did you say? If you're, press your seam.
Yeah, I think
if your back is piece trimmed off and press open. Oh, it's just the back. The opening. We still should be pressing it to the dark side, but the seam itself in the back, for the back part, you want open.
Pressed open. And that's part of that is when you load it onto the rollers on the machine.
Yeah.
And if that seam is perpendicular to the roller, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Then as you roll that backing on there, it starts to lump up.
Yeah. Interesting. So making it open is the best way to go. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
I had just talked with somebody who they use 2 layers of batting. They do a cotton and then they add a wool. They have 2 layers every time.
I've done that. Actually, I quilted a quilt. It was mine, and it was back in January or February for a quilt show that happened in March, and I wanted it to be very what's the word?
Like dramatic, puffy,
a lot of definition.
right? Yeah, that's what she said. That if she's going to go through all that work, she wants to have it really defined. So she does 2 layers, one cotton and one wool. Yes,
that's exactly what I did, and it was. Oh boy, it was real puffy to quilt, but it looks really good. And unfortunately, it's not on my website. I tend to be lacking in putting up new photos on my website. So,
that's all good.
That's a work.
Yeah. Well, it's all really great. Okay, let me look back at my list. So, right. Okay. So I just think it's really fascinating. We're going to do a not class. So Edith Gross is one of the Quilting Army, and we're meeting at the shop that did the donation, and we're going to learn about long arms tomorrow at 11:30. I have to actually post that. I forgot to tell people. Any beginning lesson things I should think about, like making the transition? I've been free motion quilting for about a year and a half now, but now to this new format. Any thoughts about what we should be thinking about?
Well, I would definitely just load on a piece of scrap fabric.
Yeah.
Front and back, and do the practicing. But let's see. I'm just trying to think of. Gosh, it's been a long time since I started.
I know.
Loading the practice piece. Are you? Will you have to pin your backing?
Yeah. If you pin the backing, it's yes, you pin the backing, but you can have it floating of the batting and the top.
The top, right. Now there's these things that I have. They're called red snappers. I would highly recommend that you get them.
Yeah, what's a red snapper?
Red snapper. It's red. Well, they're red. Okay.
They're red. They would be really weird if they weren't.
It's a rod that you insert into the seam on your leader. And then it's kind of like, how PVC pipe can snap on top of each other.
Yeah.
It's not a good description. But so you put your backing next to, you lay it along the seam where the rod is.
Uh-huh.
You have this other piece that snaps on and holds it so you don't have to pin.
Oh.
And you
It
will
keeps
save
it.
so much time. And, those pins, I still keep them on hand, the big pearl-headed pins.
Yeah, that's what they said that you're supposed to get.
They prick you terribly and you
Really?
will bleed a lot.
Really?
Yes.
All right, that's not good at all. That's like
No, it's not.
dangerous. Oh my gosh.
And so I think if you just Google red snappers.
Yeah, I'm doing that now. They're all over the place. I don't quite understand how they work. I mean, I know you just explained it to me, but I bet there's videos. So red snappers.
Red snappers, absolutely. So you don't have to pin, and that will save a lot of time. And, floating's good. That's how I do most of my stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have a top that's a little bit less than flat.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I will pin the top as well, but not very often. And some people use the spray basting stuff.
Yes. Do you do that? I use that sometimes with what I'm
Sometimes.
doing now. Do you do it now? Do you do it with the long arming?
Sometimes, especially towards the end, because I don't know, what the physics of it are, but when you load your quilt up at the top, everything's nice and flat, but by the time you've rolled it and you're all the way at the bottom, everything like wants to squeeze towards the middle. It's like, it's really
interesting.
strange. So, when I notice that it's starting to do that, sometimes I'll just give it a little hand, just spray here and there to kind of just keep it under control.
Now, how much do you just keep going, and when do you stop and rip things out?
Oh my gosh, avoid ripping at all costs. Because ripping is terrible. It really, now, so this machine, does it have a stitch regulator?
Yeah, it will. It will. Yeah.
I mean, there's benefit to that, but if you learn right away to do everything non-regulated, you'll end up with a stitch regulator is a crutch.
What is the stick? So I don't have one now, so I haven't been using one for like this so I've been doing it without one for a long time now. Well, not a long time, over a year now.
Yeah.
Every night, so I've tried. But what will it do different? How does it different than what I'm doing now?
Well, it'll as you move the machine, it's only going to stitch as the motor will only go as fast as you're moving the machine. So each stitch will be
perfect. Right.
10 stitches per inch, 12, whatever you set it to. But if you're going to just do non-regulated, you press that button and you just go. So, it's a little scary. So, but, I think it's just a better way to learn.
Non-regulated is better because you actually have to like pay attention in certain ways.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you are using the regulator, then.
Yeah. Interesting. We'll have to try it both ways. And then.
If you don't use the regulator, you get real fast with your on and off button. If you're like, oh my God, I need to stop.
Right. Yeah.
Throw that button real quick.
Interesting. I'm really interested because the other thing is that, because you have it on the, it's the fabric, you have to wear the gloves and like, it's like, you have to keep it smooth. There's a lot of like, I feel like it's holding me back is like, it feels a little bit jerky. Like it's hard to keep it smooth. Is it hard to keep it smooth on the long arm?
Well, not necessarily, but you have to practice.
Yeah.
And
I'm so excited. It just dawned on me. Sorry. I was like so excited.
Oh, it is exciting. It is exciting.
Oh my goodness. Well, see, you didn't think you'd have to like be teaching me, but I'm so psyched. Red snappers. We're going to have to find out more about red snappers.
And I had my husband do a video of me.
Oh, you do? You have it?
Yeah.
Can you post it? Can you post it on our Facebook group? I would love to see it.
He was doing the filming, I felt like I don't know how many times I could have told him, get closer.
Get closer.
So
yeah, I know.
It's not the best video because
okay.
A lot of people do videos and whoever's filming is like looking right at the stitching.
That's so funny.
But it's got, and it was on the quilt that I used the two battings. And so I had to stitch with one hand and my other hand was kind of holding down the puffiness of the
Oh,
quilt
wow.
as I was
Interesting.
going. So
Yeah.
that's why I wanted him to do the filming, because it was something
Interesting.
different.
Because
So,
it's different,
yeah,
yeah. Well, I think my feeling is like I was sick of trying to put the 3 layers together. I'm hoping this makes it more reasonable, because I just
yes.
find it so annoying right now that I don't want that part. So the red snappers are probably in my future, but
Oh, yes, yeah.
it's
Order
too
them
annoying,
immediately. So,
Yeah. Well, this is really great. Okay, cool. Well, I don't know when it's arrived. We're going to do our lessons tomorrow at the shop, which I have to let people know about because I'm really behind. But this is great. Well, so very cool. This is so cool. Now, do you go to quilt shows or do you get out
absolutely.
much?
Let's see. Well, we've already had our 3 shows this year.
Yeah.
In the Portland area.
A lot. You had the quilt market come.
There was 2 things. There was a local show at the Milwaukee Senior Center, which is in Milwaukee, Oregon, and then the Clark County Quilters, which is the guild that is in Vancouver, Washington. That's local to us too. And then the Northwest Quilters, that's the guild that's in Portland proper as well. So
that's
we
a
have
lot.
And then we did have the what was it, the one you said?
Yeah, the quilt market came.
Well, oh yeah, quilt market. How could I forget that?
Yeah.
But then we also had a quilting and stitchery expo.
Wow, you've been inundated.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's some other.
And then don't you have another one? Is the Sisters one near you?
Oh, Sisters. Yeah. Sisters is the second Saturday in July, and my quilt guild actually. We have Jean Wells is coming to talk to us at our June meeting.
That's very cool.
Yes,
that's very cool. That's very exciting.
It is
that's
very
exciting. Cool.
Yeah, and then in September we have the Northwest Quilt Expo. It's a pretty big show.
That's a lot. Do you feel like there are a lot of people quilting and sewing in your area?
I think so.
That's a lot. That really is like you have to have a lot of people to support that much activity.
Right, and but it's and we have let's see, we have one shop a quilt shop right here in Gresham. We also have Craft Warehouse is another local. They have several different locations around the Northwest, and then our big quilts store is Fabric Depot. Have you heard of Fabric Depot?
No, I think I've heard of it. Is it like big and huge and like?
It is. It's in what used to be a Fred Meyer's. That's our.
Oh yeah, I know Fred Meyer's. Yeah.
So it's in an old building that had previously been a Fred Meyer. So
somebody said, I think someone posted about being in a Fabric Depot that they were there for 11 hours and still hadn't gotten through everything. I was like, how could you be there for 11? Like, oh my gosh, I'd need a lot of snacks is all I'm saying.
Right. Well, and now they've installed a little coffee shop inside.
They are so smart.
Exactly.
I like that. See, I'm all about the snacks. One of our quilt shops, we have a bunch in town, but one is right next to a bakery, and I'm definitely more likely to go to that one.
Right. Exactly.
You got to get, a croissant, then go to the quilt shop. So.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, this is really lovely. I am so excited. This is so cool. You make me feel like, okay, I can do this. I love your designs. They're so flowy and interesting, and I love the flowers. They're really cool.
Nice.
I really like them. Awesome. Anything else? Oh, intellectual property. That's what I'm supposed to be asking you about. I forgot. So intellectual property. Do you feel possessive over your designs that you do? Do you have inspiration from other places? Are you worried about intellectual property at all?
No, not really. Because I use a lot of paper patterns that are already out there in the quilting world. And if I do something free motion, it's usually because I've looked at something that other people have done, and I create it to my own ability.
Yeah. Right. That's right. That seems to be about right. And
I know what I was gonna. There was something that.
Yeah.
It is kind of intellectual property.
Sure.
I quilted a quilt for somebody.
Yeah.
And they posted it someplace.
Yeah.
And I made a comment, oh, I quilted that quilt, didn't I? And this person said, no, I did.
Oh, no.
I know.
That's not good, right? The law does not like people passing off as something else. That's called passing
Right.
off. It's not. I mean,
Right.
copyright. Strangely, copyright doesn't deal with like that kind of thing. Like, but the other parts of the law do. That's craziness, right?
Yeah. So
Now-
I kept my mouth shut.
Now, would
No.
you let? That's naughty. That's so naughty. Now, do people ever enter your quilts in quilt shows?
Yes, and when I see them, they're usually marked appropriately.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you what. Many years ago, I quilted a quilt for a lady, and she entered it in the state fair, and she won a really big prize, but she didn't credit me as the quilter.
Really? So do
Although
you feel like that's getting more and more, though, that there's like more, this is called right of attribution. It seems like there's more awareness of that
Yeah.
now. Is that
Yes.
true?
I think so. And,
Yeah.
like I said, this was at least 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And not that, older people can't know, but, social media, 15 years ago, social media was not.
There was
Yeah.
nothing. Yeah. It wasn't, you couldn't,
Right.
I always feel like you weren't as accountable. Like
Yeah.
how would you know? You know what I mean? Like there's more of a kind of accountability now, I think.
Exactly. So, she probably didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
Although, once she won that prize,
Yeah.
maybe she could have said, oh, gee, I'll share it.
Right. Now I've heard that like if you win for the people kind of, if you win for the overall, maybe you split it, but if you win for the machine quilting, then you would give it to the machine quilter kind of thing. Do you see that as a kind of standard? Like if
I
there
haven't,
is,
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I haven't, there's not, well, at the Northwest Quilters Expo that's
Yeah.
in September, I think they have prize money. The other shows, there's not prizes like that. They have ribbons.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, I think this is so cool. Okay, so I'm going to just think about you. I'm going to try to get those red snapper things, watch videos on how to put them on. They seem a
Yes.
little intimidating, but I bet they're not that hard. It always
No,
seems
no.
hard when you look at things. You're just like, what? How does that work?
Right.
But I'm super psyched about this, and I'm so glad that you came on.
Well, thank you.
I really am. Well, maybe I will be saying, okay, we have to talk again. But I'm hoping that once the long arm comes, that more people I'll learn more and ask more questions. But I'm pretty psyched about all of it.
I know. So when you do start, and you should probably have somebody film your first quilting.
Yeah, I had this idea of like having like just
Later.
those like kitten cams, where they're always on. And my kid is like, yeah, no, mom, you're not gonna have like a video like every in the house. She's like, no, that is not cool, mom, not cool at all.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I had this vision of like at any moment you could see me quilting, and I was like, yeah, that got me too. So.
No, but I think it's a great idea to, and then you can kind of gauge where you started and where you are.
Totally.
Further down the
Yeah,
road.
it's true. Well, it's just it's an experiment in learning, so I think it's fun to think this through, but it's all very silly. So, yeah. Well, thank you. Let's keep in touch, and if there's any time, just if you want to come back on, or maybe I'll reach out to you when I start to quilt to see how things are going. But I would love it, and I would love for you to teach us how to do the flowers that you make. That would be really cool sometime. So
Well, I wonder, I don't know which, is it?
they're all, you've got so many, like I love the swirliness of your stuff. You've got it's just swirly in a really cute, great way. I want to know how to do that. It's different than the
Which,
other swirls I've been seeing,
Which quilt is that on my website?
Let's see. One has got like stripes down it, like it's pink. That one's really cool. All of them are cool. They all have different kinds of stripes. There's one that's like circly. It's got like I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it. Yeah, like any of them. You have to give us, and the flowers. I love the flowers. It's like blue. This is not good podcasting. This is like, no one's gonna be able to understand what we're talking about. So there's like it's almost like what? Like you don't even know what I'm talking about. This is terrible. All right. So, but one's like a daisy. The daisies are really cool.
Oh, okay, that's actually I think it's called Daisy Swirl. That's a panto.
Oh.
And it's a little more I don't want to say compact.
It looks like complicated. Yeah, it looks really complicated. It looks really hard.
What I like about it is that it's really equally spaced.
Uh-huh.
But it's not too close together. It really flows nicely over the quilt top.
Really cool. And then just tell me tell us about pantos and why you like them.
Pantos, well, now I said that I wasn't a computerized quilter, but that's a little bit of kind of a misnomer, because I do have something on my machine. I have an Innova, and I have something called Pantovision. So it is a little tablet, and I can put the pattern on the tablet, and I watch the pattern on the tablet instead of a paper pattern on the backside.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, but I'm still doing it free motion.
Right. You're just doing it that way.
Yeah,
You're following
exactly.
it that way. Oh, that's really interesting.
But what I like about the Pantovision is I can take a pattern and I can make it smaller or bigger, or stretch it, or make it fit the quilt better.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, this is really cool. I'm really psyched. This is great. Well, this is really fun. I'm really psyched. Well, I don't know if it's going to make for a good podcast, but I'm really psyched we chatted. And I'm sorry I accused you of quilting while we were talking. There was just this weird noise. I think it's outside, but it totally sounded like a sewing machine, which I think would be awesome. We should all be sewing while we chat.
All the time.
Totally.
I'm going to go sew something. I put a border on a quilt.
Exactly. Well, this is awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Do you want to review it before I post it, or do you not care?
No, I don't care.
We didn't talk about anything very exciting.
I'm going to be what it's going to be.
Cool. Well, I will let you know when it's going out. I'll send it to you before I send it to others, so you can review if you want. But we're getting the summer schedule ready, so you'll know soon when we're getting it all. My research assistant's helping me with the sound recording stuff to get us all up and running. So
okay, I look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was really fun.
All right. Thanks for calling.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So this is Elizabeth Townsend-Gard. You've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. We want to hear from you. Join our army, our quilting army. Go to our Facebook page. Suggest people to be interviewed. Suggest yourself to be interviewed. We are excited to hear from you. But most importantly, I hope you get a chance to quilt today.